You know, video grew out of the movies. To the extent we get that language right, we get our messages across. Obviously, we want our videos to resonate with the same quality we're used to seeing on our TV screens, but we never really get to talk to someone in the trenches about it. Until now. Late last year, I was contacted by a Hollywood film editor and filmmaker named John Soares. So we decided to film our discussion, and it went all over the place. From the parallels between business and entertainment to getting started doing video and film, signifiers in film language, promoting your work, being authentic, how to win an Emmy, creating trust on camera, editing, of course, saving time in production, the joys of improvising and the difficulties of doing it all yourself, and much more. We talked for about an hour, and I edited out very little of it. It's sort of like 10 episodes in one. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't think Joe Rogan has anything to worry about, but this was a pretty good discussion. I hope you get a lot out of it.
But actually, there are a lot of connections, between the kind of stuff that you talk about and stuff that I've done. Like the getting started with all this stuff, I was doing it on my own, and a lot of it was with the support of like a very small audience, So
oh, that's interesting.
To keep them interested, I had to, because I would making like a high production, even if it's a short, it would take me like months to do that. And to keep these people interested, I had to do something more often than that. You know what I mean? So I would make videos where I would just address them and I would tell them what was going on and show them things. It's very similar to what you're kind of talking about.
Okay, so let's talk about where that came from. Who is that other person who has joined the interview? What's her name?
This is Pax.
Pax. Okay.
Pax. P-A-X.
PX. Hey, Pax. Well, welcome to the show.
I can put her away if she's moving too much.
No, that's okay. Don't worry about it. So you started on your own, like in filmmaking. You basically are self-taught, and that at somewhere along the way, like you have a very unusual situation in that most people would think about what you do as your day job, as maybe their dream job. But for you, your day job is what you use to finance your dream job. So how did you get your current day job? Tell us a little bit about that. And what is it that you do, by the way, during the day?
So I'm an animation editor. So I'm a motion picture editor who works in animation, which is similar in a lot of ways and different in others. And I was really surprised when I first got into it. It's actually really similar to live action editing, except you have more control.
So what have there been instances where in the way you edited something, you changed like the final product in some way?
In animation?
Yeah, in animation.
Yeah, it happens all the time. Like a lot of people don't know that like in animation, a lot of stuff happens in the edit. You get all these drawings, it usually starts with kind of just keyframe drawings, like major poses. And you cut them together and you put sound effects and you see how it's working. And then, the producers and the directors and stuff will sit in with you and suddenly decide they've had a new idea, or we'll even rearrange things like in live action. We'll like move shots in different orders, all kinds of stuff like that. We'll change the order of actions, because you can do that in animation, right? Like you can take two poses and switch them, and the audience is none the wiser. You know what I mean? So yeah, you do. A lot of stuff happens in the edit. It's surprisingly, you'd think it would be just like a locked thing, but it's really fluid.
That's interesting. In the world that the rest of us inhabit, in terms of the editing that we do, there isn't a whole lot to edit. It's just somebody, standing up in front of a camera and talking. And so the way they appear, their composition, their audio, their script, their manner on camera. All of that becomes much more important because there isn't a lot else going on. And recently I've noticed in the kind of videos that we do, there's a lot more happening now with motion graphics, with B-roll, with stock footage and stuff like that. And so the opportunities for editing, there seem to be a lot more of them.
Yeah.
And I think that people are in some sense struggling with this because it's kind of a big leap, you know, to go from that. And one of the things I've noticed is that there's not a great understanding of timing or rhythm or energy. How do you go about developing, or how did you go about developing that sense of energy in a production?
Well, I definitely didn't always understand that. There was a time where I would leave everything in. I was just like in love with everything, and I think you see that a lot with when you look at videos online and things like that. Mm-hmm. You'll see these like long form videos where they've just sort of left everything. They've left the whole thing. And I started when I started making these videos where I was sort of just talking to my audience. I realized that there was a lot of stuff that was just like either unimportant, or I would stutter, or I would stop and think, something like that. And I just started cutting all that stuff out, and I would just even leave a cut, I just leave the cuts, and you could see them like jump cuts, and then I started thinking, well, I'll show other stuff, I'll show footage or behind the scenes footage, things like that. But then I could cover up the cuts with that. And then I could even change the order of things I said, because I could hide all that stuff. You know what I mean? And I think that oddly, a lot of like my editing timing started coming from that, because I started hating looking at myself talking, and I'm like, what's wrong with this? Even if you watch my first film, like my first feature-length film, I think it's got a good pace, but there's stuff in there that could go. I was still learning pacing and stuff like that.
That's really interesting about changing the order of things. I think that like when I write a script and then I shoot it, I feel like to some extent, I'm halfway finished. Because anything that goes over it is going to go over it, or something might interrupt it. But I've never really thought about changing the order of things once I wrote it. And I think that's probably a really interesting concept that you can put into your editing that we don't think about very much.
I've changed. I've even changed words that I said, because I'd be looking at it later and think I should have said it like this, and I'll trim words and like make new words and things like that.
We even do that. Word?
Yeah. Sometimes you can. If the intonation is right. Oh. We actually do it in animation a lot. Can you make it sound like he didn't say this part of this sentence? And we'll cut like on a like on, especially if it's on like a consonant sound, or like a P sound or a K sound, something like that, going into another word. That hard syllable hides the cut, like the word cut. If I cut on that sound, it's a hard cut sound, so you can hide the sound of an audio cut in there.
Oh, that's
we do that a lot. We do that a lot, even in animation stuff that goes on TV. Like, I mean, it's probably not surprised. I mean, people will take clips of people and change stuff they said to create, false narratives, like all the time. That's not what we're trying to do. We're just kind of going like, oh, we wish that this guy had said something else. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. No one's going to go out and, do something horrible as a result of seeing
based on something that Bugs Bunny said, maybe.
Right. So what have been like some of the obstacles? I mean, you're kind of working in the heady upper reaches of Hollywood. What have been some of the obstacles that you've encountered along the way? And then we're going to talk about the obstacles to the work that you're doing now, which is more in the filmmaking area.
So, like, do you mean like in the business that I'm in, or getting to where I'm at?
I think getting to where you've wound up so far.
Well, it's a weird story. Like I grew up, I was born and raised on an almond farm, and I lived there and worked there until I was like in my 30s. And I didn't, I never had any hope of going to college or anything like that. So I did end up going very briefly to like a community college where I had access to film equipment, stuff like that. But I started making my first, I did a lot of experimental film stuff, like in my late teens, early 20s. And I started making my first feature like in my mid 20s, and I was still working on the farm, so it was really difficult to do that. And then it took years to make it, and like in the process, I was showing footage around, and that's kind of what got me into animation. There's a guy that I knew that was like, I need an editor. You're pretty good, and especially the martial arts stuff kind of works with animation. And I was like, I don't know if I can do it. And it turns out I could. But yeah, I didn't even get into making money off of entertainment, like as a job. That didn't even happen till, I was about 33, I think, when that happened. So I was like really late into getting into it.
That is late in Hollywood years. Yes.
Yeah. It was like usually you'd get like somebody from an art school in LA would come right out of high school and start editing, So it took me that long because I was so kind of far away from it. Everything was really clunky to me. I didn't understand who do you even talk to, So that was like a huge issue. It took me forever to sort of worm my way into that system.
Yeah.
And then, I fell into animation, which was, I never expected to do, but it was kind of serendipitous because it was like, then when I'm like 6 years into working in animation, this pandemic happened and the whole industry shut down, except for animation. Animation kept going. So I was kind of like, wow, can you imagine if I had gotten into stunts? Because I was trying to do things like that, Stunt people have been out of work, a lot of them have been out of work for 2 years at this point,
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's an aside. But yeah, there were a lot of difficulties in sort of figuring out how to get to where I'm at. How do you make money and have a job, just doing this entertainment stuff? Because like, I never had none of my personal films have made any money or anything, but they did get me the job that I have now.
Yeah. And you've been, for someone who came to it so late, it's kind of amazing that you've already been nominated for an Emmy for your work as an editor.
Yeah, that was weird. That was I got into the Editors Guild in like 2018. I think it was 2018. And then I was unemployed for like 6 months after that. I got into the guild, and still had no job for like 6 months because I was just getting spotty jobs here and there. And then I got hired at Warner, and I was working on this kids show that got canceled immediately. Like I got hired and I was like, wow, I'm at Warner. I was like, this is amazing. And I edited like 4 episodes that never went to air. And then they canceled the show. I was like, wow, okay. I guess I don't work here anymore. But then they put me on Looney Tunes, which was, we were trying to make a version of Looney Tunes that was like what it was in like the 30s. We were really trying to like do something like that. And they put me on that, and I worked on it for 2 years and got nominated for an Emmy. So it was like the second show that I did after getting into the guild, I got nominated for it. It was really weird.
Wow.
And I, And what I say is like, my friends that were on the show with me were the ones that submitted me for that. So I had no idea they were doing that. And like, so I just like credit them for that nomination, because I didn't even think about trying to submit something to like the Television Academy. Like I never never even thought about it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I personally, I also think that's a little strange that happened.
Well, it might feel strange to you because you're not used to your energy showing up in a certain way, but that's what happens. We're not always aware of it until it sort of manifests out there as it did for you. But I think that kind of thing can be engineered, actually. But
you know, I don't think you're wrong. Like I'm always kind of just trying to tinker with stuff and trying to find ways to do things that I want to do, and then those will kind of lead into directions that I didn't expect. And there is probably some aspect of what I'm doing, obviously, that's leading to these things happening. You know, and even if I'm not aware of how to sort of harness that, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That's something I've come in. Well, that was kind of like what I was kind of fascinated about the stuff you do, because I found you. I was having problems with like a green screen effect, and you know what it is? It's like with people's hair, like especially my hair, is like it's gonna have all this like static and stuff. I was having a lot of problems with that. And I found one of your videos on that, and it solved the problem for me. And then I just started watching all this stuff you did, and I started realizing like, oh, you could actually sort of take control of these accidents that happen. You know, like you could engineer something out of it and make it lead somewhere. And that was kind of what I went down a rabbit hole. I watched like 30 of your videos in like one day, I think.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I was like, wow, this is so strange. I was like, this guy's just talking to the camera. It's engaging. There's no dead time, and you're learning something. You know, and it just kind of caught my imagination. I just thought it was really interesting.
I think one of the things that you and I probably both try to think about in the stuff that we do in the output is that we would like to create moments that people can feel comfortable in, you know, which means that they can suspend disbelief for that moment so that they can enjoy the story. And I think about that like trust elements that go into a film, that go into a video, that go into an animation, that help. I mean, I used to call it settling down the audience, so that they're not feeling like, oh, I'm going to go here and there. And one of those things is composition. So, you know, the way someone is on camera. So if somebody is way, I mean, I often talk to people and they're way down here and their eyes are down here. And they're thinking, well, you know, my eyes are close to the center of the screen and that's where they're supposed to be, right?
Yeah. Well, you can see I've put very little thought into what I'm doing right now. Even.
Oh, but you're still unconsciously, you're still higher in the frame than most people put themselves, because you have this sense of composition. You don't even think about it. Like for you, it's just second nature. But I think people don't understand that when you're way down in the frame and your hair is like all over the place. So your hair is literally touching the top of the frame even. So, but what people don't understand is that when they're too far down in the frame, then someone's like, if I'm down here, your eyes are going like this, boing, 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 boing.
Yeah.
And you can't settle down. You can't settle down and enjoy the show, right? And it's such a simple thing, but I think of it as a principle. Like this is kind of how reality works. So,
yeah, I mean, there's like, for instance, there's a type of shot that I really like. That I used to use in all the wrong places. And it's kind of like, I don't know if I can do it with this camera, but like when you frame something, like if I was all the way on this side and I'm looking this way,
yeah,
and there's all this space behind me.
Oh,
like
right.
I really like that composition, but it gives you this weird sense that there's something back here.
There's something somebody back there.
There's something that should almost be staring you, right? Because it's behind me. And I used to just like, that shot looks so, I think I saw it in like The Usual Suspects or something. It's like, that shot looks really cool. But in The Usual Suspects, you were supposed to feel uncomfortable when you saw that shot. And I think that's what I liked about it. And I would just use it in like all the wrong places, you know, and it just kind of gives you this weird feeling like, oh, what's about to happen, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can do that. Like in a video like this, you can make people feel a lot of things, you know, depending on your composition. You start, if I'm, like you said, if I'm way down at the bottom of the frame, you start feeling like there's something's going to happen, you know, or something's going to come, maybe something's going to come down or whatever, you know?
And that's why your eyes keep going up there, because you're wondering what is something going to come out of the ceiling? Where's the cat? Maybe the cat's going to come down.
An anvil is about to fall on.
An animal's about to fall on your head. So those, I mean, that's kind of a trust element, you know. I can trust that nothing's going to fall out of the sky if your composition is
or at least it's not being telegraphed, you know.
Right.
You know. So
in a horror movie, something would come down on you, right?
You can always tell when something's about to happen, you know, like in a movie, like,
well, the music changes.
Something.
Yeah.
Well, the music changes. They'll frame something where you go like, well, something clearly is about to happen in this part of the frame, right?
My favorite part where they're projecting is where you know that, like, you know, the hero is being chased by someone and doesn't know it, and they come out the door, and all of a sudden it's a close-up shot on them as they're moving toward the camera. It's like, oh yeah, here comes the bad guy.
yeah, it's, you can catch on to that, and people are, even when they don't understand that language, they're subconsciously reacting to it because it's a universal thing. I mean, you don't have to understand how your breathing works, you just do it, you know. And people do react to it, you know, whether you like it or not. It took me a while to learn things like that, you know, because I would just see shots that I liked and I could do them really well, but they were communicating all the wrong things.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
You did the shot because you liked it. You weren't sure why you liked it, but once you realized why you liked it, then you realized you couldn't use it everywhere.
Right. Yeah. You have to, it's in your bag, and you got to wait for the right
bag of tricks, right?
Yeah.
So when you were thinking about talking to people who make simpler videos where they're not running all over the place and doing backflips and ninja kicks and all that kind of stuff, what are some of the things you think might help people who are doing these sort of simpler videos where they're just standing and delivering a message?
Well, I think a lot of it sounds strange to say, but I think a lot of the principles are the same. You know, you don't want to. It's just like when you're telling a movie. Is just like when you're sitting and telling someone a story, right? You don't want to waste their time. And movies do waste people's time all the time. Like, believe me, like they, you know, it's like if I'm telling you a story about going and visiting someone, and I spend a lot of time giving you the directions of how I got there, I mean, I'm wasting your time, right? And movies do that too. You know, they'll spend a lot of time showing things they don't need to, or telling you things that you don't need to know. So I think that's really, really similar, even if you're just standing and looking at a camera.
Yeah, I think that I think I've heard someone express that as arrive late and leave early. So bring us right into the action. You know, we're like in the middle of the action, in the middle of this intense conversation, and then leave before the conversation quite gets resolved.
Right. You want them to want a little bit more. You don't want them to be like, I was really ready for this to be over a half an hour ago.
Yeah.
You know?
Right. Yeah.
You really want them to just wish it would keep going.
Right. You know? Some people talk about it in terms of burying the lead. So, and I always do this, like in my videos because I write all my videos, and I frequently find that if I was just to cut the first paragraph, the whole thing would work better. Start at the second paragraph. because now we're kind of into the main point. I think we all tend to use too much exposition.
Yeah, I think that, I'm not sure what it is, but I think that sometimes you're afraid it's not going to be clear or something, you know, and then when you look at it later, it's just like, man, I really already know what's going on. Like, you know, you watch you write a movie or something, you cut it together, you watch it, and then you're like, oh, I didn't need to shoot this scene at all. You know, I already understood what was going on. Wow. And the same thing in a story. If you're just telling someone a story, the same thing happens. You know, you start thinking, well, they need to know why I was going to the grocery store and what I needed and things like that. And you don't really need to know those things. Mm. You know, the logic of going to a grocery store is going to be there already, you know. But he's like, you know, you like what you're saying, like Star Wars, the opening of Star Wars. They do give you like the opening crawl that tells you what's happening. But the brilliance of that movie is you don't need that. They actually could have just opened and have the ships flying over with lasers shooting at each other. And you're going, you want to know why that's happening, and you're going to find out. Mm. And I think, but I think that was a studio thing. I think the studio it's not clear enough, George. You know, I think it was something like that. And so they sort of made him tell the story that didn't need to be told, you know. But it's kind of exactly what you're saying. It's kind of like if you just cut that, you'd be right in it, and you'd still know everything you needed to know, or at least you'd be curious and you'd find out, you know.
That's interesting. I think one other thing that's kind of like that is that we may put too much of ourselves in our videos. For instance, I made a video last week, and I had written, it was much longer when I originally wrote it. And toward the end of the video, I started talking about myself again. Like, I had talked a little bit about myself in the beginning, like, you know, what it was like in school and all that. And then at the end, I started talking about myself again. I thought, why are you doing that? And so I decided to cut it out and see what happened. And it was actually much better. It actually sort of the through line of the story held together better when I didn't interrupt it with my own, you know, junk.
Yeah, it's well, and that's kind of a neat thing about editing too, especially in the modern world, that it's so easy to try something that you don't have to be married to it. You know, you can make 3 or 4 different cuts of something and never show them to anyone, and you get to see what could have happened. You know, mm-hmm. And I think that's something even editors don't do that enough. I think you should try a few different versions of whatever you're doing if you have the time. You know what I mean? Like, you know how it is. But
right. So
if you've got the time.
What do you suggest to our people who maybe they don't have the time? You know,
yeah.
They want to get started. They want to do something halfway decent or more than halfway decent, but they don't have forever to learn. What would be some nice things that would help them get started and have things look halfway decent, but, you know, so they don't feel embarrassed about being on camera, but they can get it done in a day instead of a week?
Well, I think that, you know, like what you do is like you write everything ahead of time, and then you can read it back, and you can even edit. It may be faster if you're going to edit a script than to edit a video. You know, that's one thing. Of course, you do always end up seeing something in the video that you didn't see in the script. But I think it's if you always come at it from that perspective of like, you know, that you need to get to the point, you know, that you need to not waste people's time, you know, things like that. I think that naturally you're gonna kind of come to that conclusion. I mean, obviously, if you had more time to whittle it down, that'd be great. But yeah, I think having that approach out of the box is okay, I'm not going to waste time. Let's see, like, you know, inevitably you do have to go back and edit. I feel, I mean, I do, I can't do like one takes, big one takes and things like that. You can. It's kind of amazing.
Well, there's an awful lot of practice that went into that, but I think I try to, for the most part, promote writing beforehand because it saves you so much time. Some people that I work with have told me that, hey, I spent like 10 hours on this 20-minute video, 10 hours shooting this 20-minute video that was even on a teleprompter. And I thought, that shouldn't happen. That really shouldn't happen. And I think some of it comes down to the technology that you've chosen is not the optimum technology, especially if you're doing telepromptering. But if you've got the right teleprompter, if you've got the right software, you can do a 5-minute video in 5 minutes. I generally do that. And then another couple of minutes just to, import the script into the software and throw it up on the screen. But there are a lot of places that can trip you up along the way. And I spent most of my time in the last few years trying to systematize what I do so that I can spend most of my time writing and editing and the least amount of time shooting, because you want to be fresh when you're shooting, right? You don't want your energy to start to lag because you're just getting worn down by your software. That's an awful feeling.
Well, that's like, I have learned the same kind of stuff when you're filming an actor. If you get into like take 20, you're basically not getting this. You're not going to get this shot. You know what I mean?
Yes, you're absolutely.
It's the same idea, right? I mean, it's like if that person said this line 20 different ways, and now they're starting to get tired of it, and they're not going to suddenly give you this golden take. It's just not
exactly. It's the whole approach that's wrong. It's that isn't working. They have to adjust their energy somehow. They have to come at it from a different angle, and then everything should work. So I'm really interested in the work that you do to promote the other work that you're doing beyond the editing stuff. Your filmmaking work. You mentioned that you early on started creating videos for the people who were following your work. Are you still doing that?
I stopped for a long time, and I'm about to start doing it again. I kind of stopped doing it because making my first film was really difficult. And by the time I got to the end of it, I could see, like when I would try to do a video for the audience where I was just talking to the audience, I could see that the spark had gone out of my eyes. And I was like, I really don't want to do this to these people, so I just kind of stopped. But yeah, I recently started realizing, this was really kind of carrying my ability to make this stuff. And that's why, I haven't made as much stuff in the past like 6 years, so I would like to start doing it. I'm going to start doing it again. I'm actually making plans.
So what do you think you'll do this time? Will you do it differently, or what do you think will be your format or your platform? And do you think you'll do it periodically or just as the spirit moves you, or how do you think you're going to approach it?
I think I'm going to do it regularly. But I'm going to try to plan things much better than I used to. Because I used to just ride on my enthusiasm, and that as that went away, the content, the videos just became terrible to watch. It's like I was really counting on my confidence to be there, and it was gone. And so I feel like a lot more planning and a lot more writing, and probably just being honest about it. You know what I mean? Because I used to, that was another thing too, is I was like, I don't feel like talking about the things I need to talk about right now. And I'm kind of looking back at it, I'm like, I wish I just talked about how I felt about it. Like instead of saying, well, I need to look like I feel like this when I don't, And I do realize too, it's like sometimes you can't wait for inspiration to hit, but with this kind of stuff, it kind of seems like I can't be insincere about it. You know what I mean? So I kind of have to be willing to talk about things that I wouldn't have talked about otherwise, I think.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like kind of a strange, it's because that was the whole thing before. It was like, oh, this is really kind of, people were engaged and everything. And I'm like, wow, now I'm just feeling down about this. And I don't want to promote that, you know? So.
Yeah. No, because when you put that kind of energy out, that's the world that you walk into, that you've created. Yeah. 3 days later.
Yeah. Who wants to do that? You know, who wants to come into that place?
No, hardly anybody. Sane. So I think that, you know, part of it is what you feed yourself, I think probably during the week. I have a sort of rhythm to production that during the week, I'm just sort of observing, you know, life around me and what's happening with clients and customers and out there in the big wide world. And then it gets toward the weekend and things start coalescing into some kind of an idea. And I just let that happen. So, and if nothing's happening at the time, I just have faith that it's going to happen when it's time for it to happen, because I have a window that I'm allowed to have ideas in. It appears, evidently, and that's just something that's developed over time. So I think they call it trust the process. So even when you don't trust yourself, it's a process that you created. So it is kind of trusting yourself, but it's trusting that this process that you've laid down will take care of you. And I find that it does. And that's why you and I are talking, by the way, because I didn't really have an idea for this weekend. And then you emailed me and said, oh, I thought I sent you this email like 3 weeks ago. And yet you actually sent it at the exact right time.
Yeah, it's probably.
In fact, you and I have never spoken until today.
Yeah, this is, except for emails. Yeah, that's it.
Except for emails, right. So I find this whole process endlessly fascinating. You never know where it's going to take you, what kind of rabbit hole you'll go down, and you hope that it's going to be valuable to others. I very rarely do interviews like this because they take a long time, and I'm kind of, really probably a little too efficient about being efficient. And this is like the total lack of efficiency.
Yeah. So it's total chaos. Like you don't know what I'm going to say. You don't know what I'm going to say.
I have a few questions for you. I don't know what you're going to say. I hardly know what I'm going to say. It's really just a conversation.
Yeah.
And but I think sometimes that's okay too. You know, just have a conversation. Remind people that, you know, we're all real here behind the lens.
I think that what you said too about you have to have input, because you know, like for when I was making my first film, it was just all output all the time for years, because there'd be a lot of downtime. There'd be like 2 years where I didn't shoot anything, and then we'd have like a year where I had like 6 weeks where I could off and on shoot things, but I was constantly thinking about the film, and like that was it. And there's nothing going in, you know what I mean? Just it's all output.
Yeah.
And if you don't have any input, I mean, there's nothing that's going to come out. I mean, if you have no inspiration, you're not observing the world, you're not having experiences, what's going to come out, you know?
Yeah. It becomes kind of a shallow experience. I mean, life itself becomes kind of a shallow experience.
Yeah. And then your take on it, the content that you make about it is obviously going to be lacking something, you know, if it's all output all the time, you know. I mean,
what are you working on right now outside of your editing?
So I've been developing another feature length movie for a while. Like 2014 is when I wrote the first draft of it. Wow. I work with a composer in Sweden who does all my music, and he started kind of hounding me back around that time, like 2013, 2014. He's like, you should come to Sweden and make a movie here. And he's like, you should just come out and check it out, and it'll give you ideas, you know. And so I did. And while I was there, it was like, well, this is amazing. I've got all these ideas, you know. And I wrote this script. And then as time passed, the ideas changed, and now it doesn't take place in Sweden anymore. So it's changed. It's been transforming over, you know, those past, you know, since 2014. And I raised some money, and I wrote, like, I shot like the first 12 minutes of it, and I just put it online. and it's kind of like a pitch tool. But yeah, like I've got like I think the final draft of the script is done now, and I'm just kind of trying to shop it, trying to raise money, because I don't want to make another. Like, my first film was made for 30 grand, and it was like just the hardest thing to do. And I just told myself I'm never going to do a movie that cheap ever again. So I'm kind of in that space where I'm trying to figure out exactly how I'm going to do this.
What makes it so hard when you're that low budget?
Well, what makes it hard is you can do it. That's the problem. You can actually do it. But it's going to run you ragged. It's going to be like, there's no room for error. Everything has to work the first time. You know, like for instance, if you go out and shoot something and it costs, say that shoot for one day cost me like $4,000. Well, if I go home and I look at it and I say, oh, this is not working. Well, I don't have another $4,000 to go do that again, you know? So it's just, and you also, things that you would normally just go out and hire somebody to do, you got to get really creative about how you're going to get those services, because you don't have the money to pay for them, you know? So yeah, it's too hard. But so what I would say is, what the worst thing about it is that you can do it.
Yeah, that's a really interesting observation. It becomes not so much about the movie as about the process of making the movie.
Yeah, I always said that the story of making the movie was way more interesting than the actual movie. And that probably shouldn't happen.
I don't know. Maybe it should. But then
you never know. I could make
that movie, and then the story of making that movie would be more interesting than the story of making that movie.
That's what I said. I was like, gosh, maybe we should make a documentary about this, and that would be the movie.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah.
Like what was the Orson Welles documentary that came out recently that was about his last movie that was never finished? That's a fascinating documentary.
Did you see the one about Terry Gilliam's Man of La Mancha?
Yeah. Also fantastic.
Yeah, great documentary. Boy, he's always been a big hero of mine. In fact, one of his films is my favorite film of all time, The Fisher King.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he's great. I mean, he's and a similar thing. He's like, he wants to do things his way. So getting stuff financed is really hard, you know, and he ends up with very small budgets for what he's doing. Right. And it's very hard. I mean, Man from La Mancha was that story. It was like, he always kind of pulled it off, and that time he didn't, you know, and that's what made that story fascinating.
So you're raising money now for your next film.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to raise money.
How you're going to raise money. So my suggestion would be, for what it's worth, is to make some more videos about what you're doing, and maybe, you know, explain it a little bit along the way. I think having discussions like this with more people might be helpful for you.
Yeah, I'm trying. You know, this thing was like, when I found your stuff, it felt like I was stepping out of a box. I was not used to seeing stuff like that, and I had learned something from you that was technical, but it seemed like that wasn't what you were necessarily in the business of doing. And I just felt like I stepped out of a box that I'd been stuck in. It was like, this is like a different kind of a thing, and it's helpful, and it's, and then I think that is really something I have to do more of, probably other people should too, but
probably, I think it would help them more. Surely, I think it would make their lives easier to not be, butting up against their own resistances to everything. Because if you can do this, then there's a lot of other stuff you don't have to do, I've found. So, there's a lot of this can replace a lot of pitching. Because you have to pitch, because otherwise they don't know anything else about you. But if you're using your platform to talk consistently, well, they already know you.
Right. Yeah.
And if you can show little bits and pieces along the way of what you're doing. Sorry, I should. What am I?
No. I'm totally. It's great. You can always cut it out later if you want to. No, I just enjoy. I just enjoy the conversation.
Yeah, me too. Was there anything else you would like to leave our audience with? Our audience of doctors and lawyers and financial people and therapists and people like that who just really love doing video, want to do more of it, want to be in it, want to get their message across, want to develop credibility and trust.
I don't know how helpful this will be, but a big part of it is to just do it. It may not work out perfectly the first time, but if you are really serious about doing it, you have to do it. Because I've just met too many people, like, for instance, in what I do. There's a lot of people that want to do what I do, but they never do. They they're saying, well, I'm not good enough, or I don't have the skills or whatever. But you have to start with something. You have to do something, So I would just say, don't be afraid of it. I actually liked. Last night I was watching one of your early YouTube videos. Maybe not one of your earliest videos, but it was early on YouTube, where you were showing how to do like a setup in like a living room, and you were showing the lights that you bought, which is like those dome lights, like those metal dome lights that you just like at a hardware store. When I shot my first film, I used those lights, those exact lights, and I think you might be surprised because it looks like decently like a movie, So like when I saw you doing that, I was like, he's right about this. Like, you can literally go to the hardware store and buy the cheapest light. Like, don't let people talk you out of it. There's a lot of people that will say, you need to have this specific thing and you need to do it this specific way. You don't. Like, if that's going to stop you from doing it, it's not a good idea.
Good point. In fact, I have that exact light. I'm using it as a backlight right now.
It looks fantastic.
Yeah. So yeah, you're right. It's amazing what you can do. So the people that I like the most do things with simple technology, because it's knowing what to do with it that's most important. The most expensive technology in the world won't do very much for you if you don't understand how it works or what it can do. The simplest things can often be the best solutions. So I guess keep it simple.
So I'm sorry to keep interrupting you.
No, that's great. That's right. All right.
In that same video too, I think you were using was that like a Canon HV30, I think is what that camera was.
Yes, it was.
So if you watch I'll send you some footage of this so it'll make some sense. But if you watch like the beginning of my film, there's like a car chase. I shot that with a Canon HG10. And I think it's kind of in the same family. That might have been around the same time. Part of the film was shot with an HD TV camera, this big bulky TV camera that recorded on mini DV tapes, exactly like that. But that HG10, that was like an off-the-shelf purchase. It was like $500, I think. And HD camera, but it was just like a consumer camcorder for filming your family's wedding or something, and it worked really well, and you don't have to, people will tell you you gotta do things this way or that way. And what I always say is if that's going to stop you from doing anything, then it's a terrible idea. It's terrible advice.
It's interesting. I just got this iPhone 13. Actually, here we are. And I've been practicing with this. I'm going to do a video on doing green screen with the iPhone 13 because
I'm looking forward to seeing that.
Yeah. Well, with this particular iPhone, they have the codec that they're using is ProRes, and that's never been done before. So I've done a couple of experiments, and it's already way better than any other thing I tried to do with green screen with the iPhone before. So it's kind of exciting. I guess it's your point that it's, the tools are only getting better and better and cheaper as we go. I don't know what that means for the market, but it certainly is good news for anybody who wants to make pretty good looking videos.
Yeah, you can make, I think there have been movies that did well, even financially, that were shot on like iPhones.
Steven Soderbergh recently shot a couple. He says he only wants to use the iPhone from now on.
Well, then you can even get like lenses. You can get lenses that you can put over the lens.
I did a video about that. You might want to look it up.
I will.
I took a cinema lens and hooked it up, and the bokeh was unbelievable on this iPhone, and this older iPhone. So
That's awesome.
Crazy stuff. But you have to be in pretty good shape if you're going to want to use that on the fly, because the lens is really heavy.
Right.
So, like, how do you walk around with it?
Well, there's all kinds of things like that now where the camera. So I'm building out this. I have like a big movie camera I use to make movies, but there's a lot of things that I don't film because I can't carry that around with me, and I want to film a lot of things. And so are you familiar with Blackmagic?
Oh, sure. That's my main camera now, is the Blackmagic.
I figured, because your stuff looks pretty good. This is the original pocket cinema camera that they made. So it's like, I think it's like out of production, but this camera can shoot images that, like, if you put it next to like an Arri Alexa, which is like $100,000 cinema camera, like you can't tell the difference. And it's that big. And the lenses, you can put lenses on it that are huge. There's like the camera disappears in the lenses.
Yeah, right.
But you can buy these things on eBay for like $500 now.
I didn't realize
just build them out.
That's a really good tip. That is a really good tip. Thank you.
They're out of production, but it's still a fantastic camera. Like there's stuff you're watching in movie theaters that this can rival.
Well, I think people don't understand that part of it is the size of the sensor. The larger the sensor, the more latitude you're going to have, and that also means that you can use really good lenses on it. Yeah. But it's not just the size of the sensor; it's the size of the pixels. Sometimes they try to crowd too many pixels onto the sensor, but with video, you want fewer sensors, fatter sensors in essence, and that's what they've done on this camera. The one that I'm using right now is the Panasonic GH5S, which is like the regular GH5, but the S means that it's got fatter pixels. That's pretty much the only difference.
Which Blackmagic camera are you using as your main camera? Right?
It's the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K.
Okay, I've got the 4K. Yeah, I love it.
I don't shoot in 6K. I only shoot in 4K because 6K you have to shoot in RAW, and and I edit on a Mac, which only takes ProRes RAW and not Blackmagic RAW. So at some point, it'll take Blackmagic RAW and maybe we'll do 6K, but it's not really necessary for the kind of videos I'm doing.
It's kind of like 6K, I would think is kind of like an effects kind of thing, where you'd want to have a lot of, you don't want to have a lot of information, or maybe you want to zoom in, like zoom in on an image and still
like,
not.
Like a nose hair or something?
Yeah. But yeah, because even movies, most movies are like 1080, so our cameras are already blowing that away. It's really not necessary.
At this point, it's about the ideas, I think, that are going into it, not so much about the technology. You have to learn the technology. You have to learn why things happen the way they do. But after that, it's really what's coming out of you.
Yeah.
Well, John, this has been really fun and enlightening, and I hope our people really get a lot out of it. You're a person who came from literally, was it a pecan orchard?
It was an almond farm.
An almond. You grew up out of an almond farm, and basically took over Hollywood. So this is not this. I think that you're a living example of how you don't have to come out of film school in order to be able to be really good at this, and even achieve the incredible stuff that you've achieved already in your career. And we'll be watching you for what happens with your next film.
Thank you.
You've got some fans here now.
It's been great. I'm glad we finally got to do this. It was a ton of fun. And I definitely hope your audience gets something out of it. I know I do feel that there are connections, between these things.
There definitely are. Well, maybe we'll talk again. We'll see what happens. And in the meantime, hasta la vista. And I'll be watching for you online, John.
Okay.
Thanks much.
Thank you.